Hello everybody, Scotia here, and welcome to another chapter review for the latest chapter of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 9, the JoJoLands. So it has been another month, and we are now finally in double digits, as this is now chapter 10 that we're on. And yeah, last month we ended on a really exciting note. We got introduced to our first enemy stand user, or human enemy stand user I should say. We previously only really had Rohan and the cats. So this is kind of like the first proper one. Like, obviously the other two were fights, but you know, if you class it as human or humanoid people, I should say, given part 8 and what possibly this enemy stand user is. But yeah, anyway, that's kind of that's neither here nor there. Yeah, so yeah, for all intents and purposes, our first like actual proper, you know, stand fight. So yeah, pretty exciting, and we ended on a very dramatic note with a very great reveal. I'm still really impressed with the reveal that the Paco that Jodio and us were seeing at the end of the last chapter, and the chapter before that was the enemy stand user the entire time. Jodio got nicked with a knife on the throat. So yeah, that's where we left off, so without further ado, let's just get right into it. So we started off pretty much immediately where the last chapter ended, with Paco facing off against the enemy stand user, and Jodio like on the floor, like I said, with his throat cut. And it's kind of a bit of a tense standoff as Paco, you know, was questioning the enemy stand user, like, what are you, like, who are you? And then we get a very good showcase of Paco and the hustle here, as the enemy stand user pretty much lunges at Paco with his dagger knife type thing. And Paco proceeds to use the hustle to basically use a like food tray or like a lunch tray or whatever you want to call it as like an arm guard. And obviously we'll see more of it in a second as we go through the next couple pages, but you know, for a while now I've really been kind of like wanting Paco to have his moments, like his moment in the spotlight where kind of like he gets to showcase what he's like and what he can do, because I feel like at this point, prior to this chapter, every other character in the main crew has had that moment where they've been able to show off, I'm adept at doing this, like I'm smart, I use my stand in this way to overcome this scenario. Obviously Jodio in the first couple chapters, you know, he was using November Rain in really cool and interesting ways, like to introduce the part. And then in the mansion we had with Rohan, we had Dracona, like they had some of their parts, you know, where they got the focus for a bit. And then in the forest with the cats, which has actually got a name now. I think the name of the cats is Wild Cat Size, and the name of their stand, the string stand, is called Cat Size, which I believe is a Suzi Quattro song. So pretty cool. Finally, you know, glad that we finally got a name for those cats in the stands. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. But yeah, anyway, so that fight in the forest, in the mountains, Usagi came in and he had his moment where he was able to use the Mate Kudasai to kind of like win that scenario. So pretty much everybody's had a moment except for Paco, and finally in this issue Paco gets his moment. And honestly, this could be my favourite one in terms of like, you know, these characters showing off what they can do with their stands, because the way Paco uses the hustle in this chapter is so good. It's just so like I've really been on the fence about like, do I actually like the hustle as a stand? I've said in previous, you know, chapter reviews, like, you know, I kind of hope it has a physical form because I like physical forms and seeing the different designs, but I was fine with it. But yeah, like the way the hustle has been used, it's been used in interesting ways, but it doesn't get used often. Like, it's very situational. I feel like it can only be used in very specific circumstances. Like I think the only one that comes to my mind is when in the mansion, when Paco like uses the hustle to like attach himself to the roof to grab Rohan from behind, and like that was a really cool moment, but like it didn't really last long because Rohan just like touched his hand and Paco got knocked out straight away. But yeah, this is like an actual proper demonstration of like, this is what the hustle can do, and it's awesome. Like seeing it used in this way and like actually seeing its full potential, maybe not its full potential, but seeing how it can be used in a fight, because that's kind of been one of the really interesting things about this part for me, is like the main hero stands, like the main crew stands. They're very different to what we are usually used to with JoJo stands, especially like main character stands. Like they're always kind of like, the term people use is punch ghosts. Like, you know, it's always a stand that has two fists that can fight back, like Soft and Wet, Stone Free, Star Platinum, you know, etc, Tusk, or Tuskak 4 mainly. So, you know, there's always been some form of like a stand that can at least punch and attack, but these stands are all very, you know, like I said, they're very situational based. They can only be very much used in certain ways, But that's kind of been one of the really great parts about Part 9 so far, is seeing how Araki uses these stands in these ways where they are incredibly effective. Like, stands on the surface, like, you know, Jodio's and November Rains is like, oh, it just fires like really heavy raindrops. Like, you think, oh, okay, but then the ways that Jodio has used it is insane, like, blows your mind. Same with, you know, Dracona and Smooth Operators, Usagi and the Mate Kudasai. But like I said, now we finally get, you know, Paco and the Hustle's moment to shine. And yeah, it's just really cool stuff. Like, he uses the dinner tray to like block the dagger stab, and then we get, I don't know if this is my favourite panel yet, but this was probably my favourite overall moment. Like, you know what, screw it, this is my favourite panel, because this killed me. I couldn't stop laughing when I like first saw this, because Paco blocks the tray and then just goes, do the hustle, and then like tenses his muscles, and then on the next page he just immediately like auras like the enemy stand user, just punches him in the face. And it's like, man, when I saw that I couldn't stop laughing, because my like history with the song Do the Hustle is like, it's mainly the scene from Futurama. I think it's the episode where Fry tries to get the dog back, you know, in that very emotional episode that's very infamous. He dances to like Do the Hustle for hours outside the museum where his dog's, you know, being held because it's been fossilized. And it's like, it's always like, that song has always like stuck with me, like with that moment. Like, whenever I think of the Hustle, I always think of that moment from Futurama. So seeing Paco like literally say do the hustle and then just go alright, like, oh man, that was so funny. But like, it was a really cool moment, but like, oh, it killed me. I thought it was so funny. So Paco pretty much then proceeds to just kind of like beat the shit out of this enemy stand user. Just like launches them back, they collide with tables, and then Paco kind of like thinks about like how weird it is, because he says he touched, like by punching them he felt their skin, and he says that like their skin is like sand. And very interesting wording here. He says, in every bit of the texture of, you know, the fragments coming off of him, which I assume is his stand, it feels like a rock fragment, and he describes it as like a rock fragment that feels like sand. And I said in the last chapter, like, I'm pretty sure this guy is a rock human, and the wording that Paco uses, not just in this moment but in other moments later on, feels like a lot of the descriptions is like, it feels pretty blatantly like teasing that this is a rock human, which at the same time makes me think it's not a rock human, because I don't know, I feel like, I don't know if Araki would really like be that blatant about it, because at this point, like, I'm like fairly convinced, apart from this doubt in the back of my mind about it being too obvious, about it being like a red herring of sorts. Like, it feels too obvious that this is a rock human. Like, I mean, from the moment the disguise started crumbling off at the end of the last chapter, like, I've been like, oh, this is very clearly like rock human stuff because it's rock related. But then you got this moment where like I almost said Rocco there, where Paco says like, you know, his skin and the rocks have a texture like sand, and like it breaking off into rock fragments, you know, rock, you know. And then later on, which we'll probably get to, he says like, you know, is this guy even human? You know, it's a lot of very obvious signs here. We'll have to see how it goes. I think overall I'll probably lean towards him being a rock human. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being a bait and switch, but I think, you know, it makes sense. Rock humans were such a, you know, vital part of, you know, Part 8, but were done in such a way where I don't really think you really got like the full extent of them. I feel like you can do more with rock humans based, you know, more than just what was done with them in Part 8. I feel like we got a very kind of like, I want to say secluded kind of view of rock humans based on, you know, the ones that are in Part 8, mainly the Logakaka organization like Toru and Demo and, you know, Aisho and all those characters like Yotsuyu, etc. But yeah, I just feel like that was kind of like just one side or one, you know, part of the rock human species that we've seen, and I feel like that we can get more out of it. And yeah, so basically I hope that this does end up being a rock human, and this is how rock humans are, you know, eventually reintroduced into Part 9. So while Paco is obviously like theorizing like what's going on here, it feels like sand, the enemy stand user stands up, and the disguise finally has fully fallen off, and we actually get our first look at them. And a very interesting design. You see bits of it here. It's kind of almost like a onesie type suit of sorts, but it kind of reminds me of like a onesie with an apron, but it's got like bows on it and stuff. It's a very like late JoJo Araki type design where it's kind of abstract, like, but in some form of like realism fashion type abstract stuff. I don't know, like if you've seen the designs in Part 8 and even Part 7, and you know what, even Part 6 and Part 5, you'll probably have some idea, you know, of what it's probably like. But it's an interesting design. I think they look cool. You don't really get like a full on like straight up view of them. It's very, you know, they're always at some form of angle. They're always kind of like, you know, leaping in the air or doing stuff. Like I think the pages here, which you should be seeing on screen now, that's like, these are probably the best shots you actually get at this person, like what they actually look like. Obviously as well, the rock stuff floating in front of them is kind of obscuring their face, which I'm pretty sure is the intent, and I'm pretty sure that's their stand, like the actual rock pieces are their stand. But yeah, so basically like Paco starts like asking the guy like, who are you, like, well, like what's going on, and the guy just doesn't answer, he doesn't say a word. So obviously I think he's trying to like intimidate Paco. But then Paco kind of like in you know, stark contrast to the previous chapter, because I said in the previous chapter, like at the time when I was reading the last chapter, like it made sense to me that Paco was kind of like, we should just hand over the rock, like this is, you know, this is too much for us, we, you know, we're out of our depth here. Because up to that point I kind of felt like Paco and, you know, maybe the others, but definitely Paco, like weren't really invested in the overall plot. You know, they weren't really, you know, sort of like, I'm willing to risk my life for this lava rock. And like at the time it kind of really only felt like, you know, Jodio and maybe Dracona were really the ones that were willing to kind of go the extra mile to, you know, protect the lava rock. But, you know, to kind of fly in the face of that, Paco here kind of realizes that, you know, the enemy stand user, you know, is not going to stop until he gets the lava rock, and has this defiant moment where Paco also confirms, like, we're not handing this rock over, like, you can go to hell. So it's very cool that, you know, the whole group is in solidarity, basically, like, they're not going to back down. They're in this for the long haul now, which is cool. I did think we were going to get to this point sooner rather than later, but it's cool that, like, you know what, we're all just in it now for the long haul. So yeah, I thought that was very cool. We then get some cool pages here as Paco and the enemy stand user basically have a bit of a fight. Like Paco is really good at dodging the knife attacks from the enemy stand user, which makes me wonder, because it's like, obviously if this guy's using the knife, he's probably very, you know, proficient, I guess, you know, at using it. But Paco like very easily just dodges and counters like almost every attack this guy has, which is very interesting. Like, I don't know if this is a more of a Paco thing, like this is more of a thing about like, oh, like Paco's really good at fighting, or if this is like a case of, you know, the enemy stand user actually isn't that great at using the knife. Because what you got to bear in mind is, like, obviously this guy is strong, like for now, like at this part of the story, but like I said earlier, like this is pretty much the first real enemy stand user we fought. So in the grand scheme of things, he's probably not going to be like the highest, you know, the highest tier villain we're going to be facing. Like, he's not the strongest that we will see throughout this part. There will be much stronger people that these characters will come across as the part goes on. So, you know, maybe it's just a case of like he's not actually as skilled as, you know, we're led to believe, or he's leading us to believe. But yeah, Paco like pretty easy kind of like dodges a lot of his stuff, and he just, again, like just a real good showcase of the hustle here, like how hustle can be used in combat. Because there's a part where the guy like tries to like slice Paco's arm, but like Paco uses the hustle to like grip the blade of the knife like around his muscles. And then, very interesting thing here, because Paco like punches his muscles, and then like that sends like the twisting muscle, like, you know, visual effect here. It's kind of like sends it to the enemy stand user, and then his muscles start going haywire and he gets like knocked down. So very interesting. It seems like Paco can like send his like distorted muscles like into a victim through, you know, like through either through contact or like indirect contact, like what we see here with the blade of the knife, like traveling through the blade of the knife into the stand user. So, you know, I think it's very interesting. I can definitely see that being used in quite a few ways as this part is going to go on, which is very interesting. And then, yeah, it's just weird. Like, Paco just like really easily just beats the shit out of this guy. Like, it's kind of like it's kind of funny how like he pretty much for this entire like mini fight here, like, because this is about halfway through the chapter or roundabout. Like, he pretty much has this guy's number for like the whole fight. Like, this guy never really has a moment where he's, you know, one-ups Paco or gets the upper edge. Because Paco like grabs him by the throat and he kind of like investigates him more, and he says that like his skin feels like sand too. And this is when Paco starts like going like, what the hell are you? But then we get a very interesting thing here, and then this confused me, but then it gets explained in a couple pages from now, but it's very interesting. We then see like another part of this enemy stand user's ability, where he sort of like sends his arm with the knife through a mural of clouds and tries to stab Paco from behind. And at first I thought this was outside and this was actual clouds, and he had some form of a weather report ability. Very confusing at first. I didn't really get that this was actually a mural, a painted mural in the ceiling of the building they're in, until Paco mentions it later on. But yeah, so essentially we're then introduced to another part of this guy's ability, in that he can kind of change the perception of where people think he is, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard to describe, to be honest, but yeah, he basically is able to move his limbs through disguise or some sort, to move behind the person in order to stab them. But this also doesn't work, and Paco just completely beats the shit out of him again and sends them colliding with tables. And then this is when Paco really starts questioning what the hell is this guy. And then we go back to Jodio, who's still lying and coughing up blood because of his throat. And it's really funny actually, because Paco's just Jodio will wake up and just put a band-aid on it, and Jodio literally does that. And yeah, I said at the end of the previous review chapter review, sorry. I said Jodio was going to be fine. It was going to be it just barely caught me, blah blah blah, I'm alright. Which is basically the case here. Jodio literally puts a blaster on his throat and he's fine. Yeah, so the page I'm on now, this is when Paco starts questioning, is this guy even human? He's got to be human, but his skin is kind of like sand. So yeah, this is when the first start kind of throwing in on the idea that this could very well be a rock human, but I went into it earlier, but we'll have to see how that goes. We then cut to Dracona and Usagi as they leave the Diamoch watch sales room, and they're kind of celebrating being able to get away with it and their test working, and they're drinking the champagne that they stole from Rohan. There's a very funny bit at the bottom here where Araki's be sure not to drink until age 20, with Dracona drinking the wine. So just a funny little bit, and they catch up to Paco and Jodio. And they're kind of going on about we did the test worked, we figured out how the lava rock works. And then Paco's just shut up, we're literally in the middle of a fight. And then Jodio and Paco kind of discuss the things that the enemy Stan user said while he was disguised as Paco. And it's a very interesting line here, because I know a lot of people have been going on about how they think that the guy mentioning the mafia in the previous chapter was a hint that this is going to be the alt universe version of Passione, and it could absolutely end up being that. I'm not denying it, but Paco kind of shoots the idea down here, because Jodio's the guy said he was part of the mafia. But then Paco's no, he was probably just lying to scare you into giving it up. So still kind of unclear whether that was true or not. It could still really go either way. And then we get a really kind of funny side bit here, because a guy who really looks like Joshu, he literally has the exact same haircut as Joshu. I think I think the only thing that kind of stops him actually being Joshu straight up is the fact he has both arms, or he has both arms normal. But yeah, I thought it was funny because it was just Joshu's hairstyle is actually common around the world. This is a trendy hairstyle in Hawaii and Japan. So it's such a dumb hairstyle, but it's JoJo's and it's Joshu, so it works. But I can't not associate this haircut with absolute losers. We then get it kind of is a little bit drawn out, I feel, where basically Dracona just keeps watching these guys because they bought the watch. The guy bought the watch for his girlfriend. And Dracona keeps getting distracted while Jodio and Paco are we should just literally book it to the car and get out of here, it's not worth fighting in the open, we're exposed. And the whole time they start heading to the car, Dracona just can't stop looking at these two people with the watch, and it's because, they think this is going to be the moment, because obviously we found out in the last chapter that basically the lava rock, essentially, to kind of keep it simple, it kind of it assures that items of worth and of strong monetary value, I guess, will return to the holder of the lava rock. It's a fated thing. No matter what happens, no matter how long it takes, whatever item of monetary value is lost, it will eventually return to the owner of the lava rock. And this is kind of what Dracona is waiting for. They're waiting essentially for the watch to return to them. But yeah, so like it's this kind of thing where like as they're all walking away, like Dracona keeps looking back and it's like, oh, they've left they've left the watch out in the open, like it's getting food and crumbs and birds are attacking it, and then it looks like one of the birds actually pick up the watch, and this is when Dracona gets excited because it's like, oh, like it's already coming back, like this is the work of the lava rock, like the lava rock has already worked to get this watch, back to me, and then. This moment I thought was great. This is like the other one I was kind of like my other contender for like the best panel, because as the bird goes to drop the watch by Dracona, Jodio notices that the woman is still wearing the watch. She actually never took the watch off, and that Dracona is actually by the enemy stand user who disguised himself as essentially everything. He disguised himself as the sky, as the clouds, as the bird, as the watch, as the buildings, as the table. And I like these two panels here. I thought was amazing. Like this was like my like mind blown moment, especially kind of similar to the previous chapter where like that mind blow reveal of like you weren't talking to Paco the whole time. It was the enemy stand user. And this one of like I just love like the full extent of like how Araki uses this camouflage stand to like just completely like blend in and surprise attack Dracona like this. Really cool. Amazing panel, like the artwork on it is fantastic. It honestly really surprised me. I wasn't expecting like the guy to just appear literally out of thin air and attack Dracona. And attack him he does, because he steals the lava rock from Dracona and then stabs Dracona through the neck, which is like a very brutal injury, like much worse than what Jodio had at the end of the previous chapter. And yeah, everybody's shocked, like Dracona starts pouring blood and falls to the ground, Jodio rushes over to them and Usagi, and like it's lots of blood, and honestly it's like I'm fairly confident Dracona isn't going to die here, because literally we're only on chapter 10. I mean, it'd be an insane like early point of like, okay, this is the motivation now, like they killed they killed Jodio's brother, like now we have to go and kill them. Like I said, I can see, I don't think it's impossible, but I don't think it'll happen. I think it'd be very, very cruel for Dracona to go out like that, especially how kind of like they're a fun character. I like them a lot. But yeah, so Usagi, honestly, it's a really good panel here at the bottom with Usagi, where it honestly looks like he's like tearing up at the idea, like, 'cause obviously he's gotten very close to Dracona now, whereas Paco is like, don't let the enemy stand user get away, because he like pretty much vanishes. He steals the rock, stabs Dracona, and then blends back in, and then Jodio like really quickly uses November rain to rain around them. And this actually manages to trap the leg of the enemy stand user and traps them in place. And this is pretty much where the chapter ends. Dracona is bleeding out heavily. The enemy stand user is pinned down by the leg by November Rain. And get a really, really cool panel here where Jodio's eyes like glare at the leg, and it's like, man, like this got me hyped, because it's like Jodio is going to go ballistic on this guy, like, for, stabbing Dracona like that. Can't wait to see, kind of like, this is going to probably be our first real look at, like, how does Jodio react when someone close to him, as in family, is, put in a life-threatening situation. Like, how does he handle something like that? Because we've seen it in other parts when a JoJo witnesses, a close family member or a close friend get injured like that to the point of near death, and how they react to it. Like the one that comes to mind immediately is at the start of part 6 when Jotaro is incapacitated by Whitesnake, and Jolene at first is like, I just want to get out of here, but then goes back into the prison to get Jotaro's discs back. That's one that really stands out to me in terms of like that determination to be like, no, like I need to go back in, I need to save them. But this is kind of a different thing. This is a thing of like, someone close to me is being hurt by this person, and now this person is fucked. And that's kind of what I hope, like where I hope this goes. I think it'd be very interesting to see. Yeah, I just think it'd be interesting to see how Jodio, deals with this. Like I said earlier, though, I don't think Dracona's going to die, because by the looks of it, Smooth Operators is already, helping to heal them. Quite interesting, though, because I kind of didn't really know what was going on at first with these two bottom panels, because I honestly thought, like, the enemy stand user had somehow like camouflaged themselves inside the wound, and like that was their hands coming out of the wound, but it's not. It's Smooth Operators, and it kind of looks like Smooth Operators is like moving the wound, which is very interesting that they have that power to like actually like displace something like that. Like, obviously we've seen them move like eyes and stuff around the body, so it shouldn't be that surprising. But it's still weird, like, think like they can literally move a wound like that, like maybe move it into a place that isn't as lethal. But yeah, that's the end of the chapter, so without further ado, let's kind of wrap things up here. So that was chapter 10, we're finally now in the double digits, we're almost coming up to a year, we're only about 2 issues or 2 months away from getting to the first year of the JOJOLands, and I will probably do a deeper kind of like look back at the last year and kind of like go through my thoughts on, you know, the first year of part 9, but that'll probably be a separate video like when it gets to that in February. Like also then, so probably in February I will probably end up doing maybe 2 videos, like one for the chapter that comes out in February, and the other chapter, sorry, the other video being like basically my thoughts on the first year of part 9. But you'll probably already know what it is, I've said it a bunch of times, but man, part 9 is just, it's so good at the moment. I'm really enjoying it. I'm enjoying it so much more than part 8, it's not even funny really. But yeah, I don't want to go too much on it, I've already probably talked for long enough. But yeah, just another good chapter, man. Araki's really killing it, which is nice to see, because I definitely think a lot of people were kind of like, I wouldn't maybe say lost faith in him, but I think a lot of people were kind of like, we'll see how part 9 goes, because the ending of part 8 was just, yeah, I don't think Araki's ever going to escape that rushed feeling at the end of part 8 and how kind of like things really just fell apart within the last like 10 or so chapters. You know, I think that'll be something that'll probably follow him forever, to be honest, in terms of like people will probably never really get over that, especially because he's never really fumbled that badly before. And in my opinion, I know people really like part 8, but in my opinion, like the last 10 or so chapters, pretty much from when Jobin dies, I think the rest of part 8 from that moment is just a steady fumble, really. But no, he's really picked it back up. Just really great stuff. He's honestly, I don't know, I don't want to like assume and make judgments off of nothing, but like, I don't know, I just feel like he's kind of having fun with, you know, the whole series again. It's not some deep mystery thriller like part 8 was trying to be. It's, you know, this feels like, you know, just like any old good JoJo part, like full of mysteries and intrigues, but on a much smaller scale, which I think suits his strengths as a writer a lot better. But yeah, I'll leave it here. They've already confirmed the next chapter is coming out next month, so I shall see you all for the next chapter review, chapter 11. So until then, I shall see you all later. Thank you and goodbye.
We await your return, warrior.